The rain hammered against the metal roof of the airport maintenance hangar like 1,000 tiny drumsticks. 16-year-old Damon pulled his worn jacket tighter as he walked through the massive building, his sneakers squeaking on the polished concrete floor. The smell of motor oil and cleaning chemicals filled the air, a scent he had grown to love over the past 2 years. His uncle Tony was somewhere in the back, mopping the floors and emptying trash cans. Tony had been working as a janitor at the municipal airport for over a decade, and ever since Damon's mom started working double shifts at the diner, Tony had been picking him up after school. Instead of sitting at home alone, Damon spent his afternoons here, watching the mechanics work on everything from small private planes to corporate jets. At first, the mechanics had shooed him away, worried about insurance and safety regulations, but Damon was quiet and respectful, never touching anything without permission. He would sit on an old crate in the corner, sketching the aircraft in his notebook and writing down everything he observed. Soon enough, the crew got used to him being around. Some even started explaining what they were doing when they noticed his genuine interest. Tonight was different, though. The hangar was almost empty because of the storm. Most of the mechanics had gone home early, leaving only the skeleton crew for emergencies. Damon sat alone with his notebook, reviewing his sketches of hydraulic systems when he heard the distinctive whine of jet engines fighting against the wind outside. Through the rain-streaked windows, he watched a sleek white private jet taxi toward the hangar. The aircraft was clearly struggling, its landing lights cutting through the darkness as it made its way to the maintenance bay. Even from a distance, Damon could tell something was wrong. The plane was moving erratically, like the pilot was having trouble with the controls. The hangar doors slowly opened, and ground crew members in bright yellow rain gear rushed out to guide the aircraft inside. As the jet rolled into the hangar, Damon got his first good look at it. It was a Gulfstream G650, one of the most expensive private jets money could buy. He had only seen pictures of these in aviation magazines at the library. The engines powered down with a high-pitched whine, and the cabin door opened. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, his face tight with frustration. He was probably in his 50s with graying hair and the kind of confident posture that comes with being used to getting what you want. Right behind him came a woman in a flight attendant uniform looking equally concerned. "Where's the head mechanic?" the man demanded, his voice echoing through the hangar. His tone wasn't mean, just urgent. "We have a serious problem with the navigation system. I need to be in Tokyo by tomorrow morning for a crucial meeting." One of the ground crew members, a guy named Pete who Damon had talked to before, jogged over. "Sorry, sir, but Rodriguez went home sick today, and the backup crew is stuck in traffic about 2 hours out because of the storm. We've got basic diagnostic equipment here, but for complex electrical issues..." The man's jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone and started making calls, pacing back and forth near the aircraft. From what Damon could hear, he was trying to find another plane or arrange alternative transportation. But the storm had grounded everything in the area. While the adults talked and argued, Damon found himself drawn to the aircraft. He had studied the Gulfstream systems extensively in his spare time, memorizing every detail from technical manuals he found online. Something about the way the plane had been moving told him the problem might not be as complicated as everyone thought. He walked closer to the jet, keeping a respectful distance but studying the external panels and indicators. The navigation antenna looked properly aligned, and there were no obvious signs of damage from the storm. But there was something about the way one of the access panels was sitting that caught his attention. "Hey, kid, you need to stay back from there," Pete called out, noticing Damon near the aircraft. The businessman looked over, irritation flashing across his face. "Who is that? Why is there a child in here?" "That's Damon," Pete explained. "His uncle works here. Kid's harmless, just loves airplanes." "Well, this isn't a museum," the man snapped. "I need professionals working on this problem, not some teenager wandering around." Damon felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment, but he didn't move away. Instead, he pointed at the slightly askew access panel near the nose of the aircraft. "Excuse me, sir, but I think that panel might be loose. If water got in there during the storm, it could mess with the navigation computer's connections." The businessman stared at him like he had grown a second head. "You think you know what's wrong with a $65 million aircraft?" "I'm not saying I know for sure," Damon replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "But I've been studying these systems for a couple years now. That panel covers the main navigation computer housing, and if moisture got in there, It would explain why your instruments were acting up during landing. Pete looked between Damon and the businessman uncertainly. Kid does know his stuff, he admitted. I've seen him studying technical manuals that would make my head spin. The man's phone rang again, and he answered it with growing frustration. Another dead end? No available aircraft. No mechanics who could get there quickly, and time running out for his important meeting. When he hung up, he looked at Damon with a mixture of desperation and skepticism. You really think you know what's wrong? I think it's worth checking, Damon said carefully. Even if I'm wrong, it would only take a few minutes to look at those connections. The businessman studied him for a long moment. Here was a kid, probably younger than his own son, standing in a maintenance hangar and claiming he could diagnose a problem that had stumped the pilots and ground crew. Under normal circumstances, he would have dismissed the idea immediately. But these weren't normal circumstances. What's your name, kid? Damon Rodriguez, sir. Well, Damon Rodriguez, I'm James Richardson, and right now you might be my only option. He turned to Pete. Can we safely open that panel and take a look? Pete nodded and grabbed his toolbox. Sure thing, Mr. Richardson, can't hurt to check. As Pete worked to remove the access panel, Damon felt his heart racing. What if he was wrong? What if he was about to embarrass himself in front of this obviously important man? But when the panel came off and Pete shined his flashlight inside, they could all see the problem immediately. Well, I'll be damned, Pete muttered. Kid was right. Look at this. Water had indeed gotten into the housing, and one of the main connection bundles was visibly corroded. It was exactly the kind of problem that would cause intermittent navigation issues without triggering obvious warning lights. Richardson looked at Damon with new respect. How did you know? The way the plane was moving when it came in, Damon explained. It wasn't random. The pilot was having to correct course in a specific pattern, which meant the navigation system was giving him bad information at regular intervals. That usually means a loose or corroded connection rather than a complete system failure. For the first time since his aircraft had developed problems, James Richardson smiled. This teenager had just solved in 5 minutes what could have taken professional diagnostics hours to figure out. More importantly, he had done it through pure observation and knowledge, not expensive equipment or years of formal training. Pete, how long to fix this? Richardson asked. Maybe an hour once I clean the corrosion and replace the damaged wires, Pete replied. We've got the parts in stock. Richardson turned back to Damon. You probably just saved my deal in Tokyo. How would you like to help Pete fix it? Damon's eyes widened. He had never actually worked on a real aircraft before, only watched from the sidelines. Are you serious? Dead serious. Consider yourself temporarily hired. As the storm continued to rage outside, Damon found himself living out every dream he had ever had about working on aircraft. Under Pete's supervision, he helped clean the corroded connections and install new wiring. Richardson watched the entire process, asking questions and genuinely listening to Damon's explanations about how different systems work together. What should have been a disaster was turning into something else entirely. A chance encounter between a poor kid from the wrong side of town and one of the richest men in the country. Neither of them knew it yet, but this stormy night would change both their lives forever. The next morning, James Richardson couldn't stop thinking about what had happened in that hangar. His flight to Tokyo had gone perfectly, the navigation system working flawlessly thanks to a 16-year-old kid who had spotted a problem that everyone else missed. During the long flight across the Pacific, he kept replaying the conversation, amazed by how naturally Damon had explained complex aircraft systems. When Richardson returned to his home base in Chicago 3 days later, he found himself driving to the municipal airport instead of heading straight to his office. He told himself he wanted to personally thank the maintenance crew, but deep down he knew he was hoping to see that kid again. The hangar was busy with its usual afternoon activity. Richardson spotted Pete working on a small Cessna and walked over. Remember me? James Richardson. You helped fix my Gulfstream a few days ago. Pete looked up and grinned. Sure do, Mr. Richardson. How did your trip go? Perfect flight, thanks to you and that young man who spotted the problem. Is Damon around today? Should be. Kid shows up every day after school like clockwork. Pete nodded toward the far corner of the hangar. There he is. Richardson found Damon sitting on his usual crate, but this time he wasn't just watching. He was deep in conversation with an older mechanic named Luis. explaining something while pointing at a diagram in his notebook. As Richardson got closer, he could hear what they were discussing. "See, the fuel flow sensor is reading normal," Damon was saying. "But if you look at the pattern of when the engine hesitates, it's always during specific throttle positions. That means the problem isn't with fuel delivery. It's probably with the throttle position sensor itself. The computer is getting bad data about where the throttle actually is." Luis scratched his head. "Damn, kid. I've been chasing this problem for 2 days. Let me check that sensor." Richardson watched as Luis opened an access panel and tested the throttle position sensor with a multimeter. Sure enough, the readings were erratic at certain positions. "You nailed it again, Damon. This sensor is going bad." "How do you do that?" Richardson asked, stepping forward. Damon looked up, surprised to see the well-dressed businessman again. "Oh, hi, Mr. Richardson. Do what?" "Diagnose problems like that. Yesterday with my plane, today with this engine. You seem to see things that experienced mechanics miss." Damon shrugged, looking a bit embarrassed by the attention. "I guess I just think about how all the systems work together. When something goes wrong, I try to figure out what would cause that specific pattern of problems. Most issues aren't random. They have a logical cause." Richardson was impressed not just by the answer, but by how Damon explained it. The kid didn't talk down to him or use unnecessary jargon. He communicated complex ideas in a way that made sense. "Mind if I ask where you learned all this? Are you taking some kind of advanced classes at school?" "Not really," Damon replied. "My school doesn't have much in the way of technical programs. I mostly teach myself from books and online resources. The public library has a pretty good collection of aviation maintenance manuals, and there are some great educational videos on YouTube." "What about your parents? Are they in aviation?" Damon's expression shifted slightly. "It's just me and my mom. She works at Murphy's Diner downtown, usually pulling double shifts. My dad, well, he's not around. Uncle Tony, the janitor here, he's the one who got me interested in planes when I was younger." Richardson felt a pang of something he couldn't quite identify. Here was a kid with obvious talent and passion, teaching himself advanced technical concepts from library books because he didn't have access to formal education. Meanwhile, Richardson's own son had every educational advantage money could buy, and showed little interest in anything beyond video games and social media. "What do you want to do after high school?" Richardson asked. "I want to be an aeronautical engineer," Damon said without hesitation. "Design new aircraft systems, maybe work for Boeing or Airbus someday. But college is expensive, and even if I got scholarships, I'd need to help my mom with bills." The conversation was interrupted by commotion near the hangar entrance. A corporate jet had just arrived with what sounded like engine trouble. The pilot was talking rapidly to the ground crew, clearly concerned about something. "One of the engines is running rough," the pilot was explaining. "Started about 200 miles out. Power output is down, and there's some vibration at certain RPMs." The head mechanic, Rodriguez, had returned from his sick leave and was already suiting up to examine the aircraft. Richardson watched as the diagnostic process began, with Rodriguez and his team running various tests and checking computer readouts. After about an hour of investigation, Rodriguez emerged from the engine compartment looking puzzled. "Everything tests normal," he announced. "Fuel flow is good. Ignition system checks out. Compression is within specs. But the pilot's right, something's definitely not right with this engine." Damon had been watching the whole process from his usual spot. Richardson noticed him scribbling notes and sketching something in his notebook. Finally, Damon stood up and walked over to where Rodriguez was standing. "Excuse me, Mr. Rodriguez. I was watching the diagnostic process and I noticed something. When you ran the engine at different power settings, the vibration only happened when the RPMs hit certain ranges, right?" Rodriguez nodded. "That's correct. But all our tests show the engine components are fine. What if it's not the engine itself?" Damon suggested. "What if something attached to the engine is loose or damaged? Something that would only vibrate at specific frequencies? Like what? Maybe one of the engine mounts or a bracket holding auxiliary equipment. If a mount is cracked or a bolt is working loose, it would only cause problems when the engine vibrates at just the right frequency to amplify the issue." Rodriguez looked skeptical, but Richardson stepped forward. "It's worth checking, isn't it? This kid spotted the problem with my plane the other night when everyone else missed it." 20 minutes later, Rodriguez found exactly what Damon had predicted. One of the engine mount brackets had developed a hairline crack, invisible during normal inspection but enough to cause vibration at specific RPM ranges. It was the kind of problem that could have led to serious damage if left unfixed. How did you know to look for that? Richardson asked Damon as they watched Rodriguez's team replace the damaged bracket. Pattern recognition, I guess, Damon replied. The symptoms didn't match a typical engine problem, so I started thinking about what else could cause vibration only at certain frequencies. Engine mounts are designed to absorb vibration, so if one was damaged, it would make sense that the vibration would be worst at the mount's natural frequency. Richardson was beginning to understand that this wasn't just luck or good guessing. Damon had a systematic way of approaching problems, a natural engineering mindset that couldn't be taught from textbooks alone. The kid was seeing patterns and connections that came from genuine understanding, not just memorized facts. As the afternoon wore on, Richardson found himself in long conversations with Damon about everything from aircraft design to business principles. What struck him most was how the teenager asked thoughtful questions, really listening to the answers and building on them with new insights. You know, Richardson said as the workday was winding down, I own a small aviation company. We maintain and operate corporate aircraft for businesses that don't want to buy their own planes. We're always looking for good people. Damon looked interested but uncertain. I don't have any real qualifications, though. No certificates or formal training. Sometimes the best qualifications are curiosity and natural ability, Richardson replied. Would you be interested in working weekends? Learning from our certified mechanics while you finish school? Are you serious? Damon's eyes lit up, dead serious. Same way I was serious when I let you help fix my plane. You've proven yourself twice today. I think you could prove yourself a lot more if given the chance. As Richardson drove home that evening, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just met someone special. Not just talented, but genuinely passionate about learning and solving problems. In his world of corporate politics and profit margins, that kind of authentic enthusiasm was rare. He thought about his own son, who at 19 had every advantage but no real direction. Then he thought about Damon, who had every disadvantage but clear purpose and drive. There was something profound about that contrast, something that made Richardson question his own assumptions about success and potential. Little did he know that this chance meeting would challenge everything he thought he knew about worth, talent, and what really mattered in life. The lessons were just beginning. 6 months later, the relationship between James Richardson and Damon had settled into something neither of them had expected. What started as a simple job offer had evolved into something much deeper and more meaningful. Every Saturday morning, Damon would take 2 buses across town to Richardson's aviation facility. The building was nothing like the municipal airport where they had first met. This was a sleek, modern hangar filled with expensive corporate jets and staffed by some of the best mechanics in the business. At first, some of the employees had been skeptical about the boss bringing in an unqualified teenager. Mike Chen, the head mechanic, had been particularly resistant. Mr. Richardson, I know you mean well, but we can't have someone without proper certification working on these aircraft. The liability alone. But Richardson had been insistent. Give him a chance, Mike. Start him with basic tasks, let him observe, see what he can do. I'll take full responsibility. Those early weeks had been challenging for Damon. He was clearly the outsider, the kid who didn't belong in this world of expensive suits and million-dollar aircraft. Some of the mechanics treated him like a curiosity, others ignored him entirely. But Damon kept showing up, kept asking questions, and kept proving that his knowledge wasn't just theoretical. The breakthrough came during his 3rd week, when they were troubleshooting a persistent problem with a Bombardier's climate control system. The air conditioning would work fine on the ground but fail at altitude, leaving passengers sweltering during flights. 3 different specialists had examined the system without finding the cause. Damon had been quietly observing the diagnostic process, taking notes and asking occasional questions. Finally, he approached Mike with an idea. What if the problem isn't with the air conditioning system itself? What if it's related to cabin pressure changes? Mike looked annoyed. Kid, we've checked the pressurization system twice. It's working perfectly. I know, Damon persisted. But what if there's an interaction between the 2 systems that only shows up under specific conditions? Like, what if the pressure changes are affecting a sensor or valve in the climate control system? It turned out Damon was exactly right. A pressure-sensitive valve in the air conditioning system was malfunctioning only at specific altitude pressures, something that couldn't be replicated during ground testing. It was the kind of systems thinking approach that impressed everyone who witnessed it. From that day forward, the atmosphere in the hangar changed. Mechanics started seeking out Damon's input on difficult problems. They discovered that his unconventional perspective often led to solutions that traditional diagnostic approaches missed. Richardson watched this transformation with growing respect for both Damon and his own employees. The kid wasn't just learning from the mechanics, he was teaching them to think differently about problems. It was exactly the kind of fresh thinking that Richardson's business needed. One afternoon, as Richardson was reviewing maintenance reports in his office, Mike knocked on the door. "Got a minute, boss? I wanted to talk about Damon." Richardson looked up, concerned. "Is there a problem?" "Just the opposite," Mike said, settling into a chair. "That kid is something special. I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've never seen anyone pick up complex systems as fast as he does. More than that, he's got instincts you can't teach." "What do you mean?" "Yesterday, we had a helicopter come in with intermittent engine problems. The computer diagnostics showed everything normal, but the pilot insisted something was wrong. Most of us were ready to tell him it was all in his head. But Damon spent an hour just listening to the engine run, taking notes about subtle changes in sound at different power settings." Mike shook his head in amazement. "Turns out there was a tiny crack in one of the turbine blades that only opened up under specific conditions. Would have been catastrophic if it had failed in flight. Damon caught it just by listening." Richardson felt a surge of pride followed immediately by concern. "Mike, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. Are there any safety issues with having Damon work here? Any legal problems I should know about?" "Actually, I've been thinking about that," Mike replied. "Kid's obviously got the knowledge and instincts, but he needs formal training and certification if he's going to do this professionally. Have you thought about getting him enrolled in some courses?" That evening, Richardson found himself having dinner with Damon and his mother, Carmen, at the small apartment they shared in East Chicago. It was the first time he had visited their home, and the contrast with his own mansion was stark. The apartment was tiny but spotlessly clean, with aircraft magazines stacked neatly on the coffee table and technical manuals filling a small bookshelf. Carmen worked as a waitress at 2 different diners, pulling double shifts to make ends meet. Despite the obvious financial stress, she was incredibly proud of her son and grateful for the opportunity Richardson had provided. "Damon talks about your hangar constantly," she said, serving them a simple but delicious meal she had prepared. "It's all planes this, engines that. I don't understand half of what he says, but I can see how happy it makes him." "Your son has a rare gift," Richardson told her. "I'd like to talk to both of you about his future." Over dinner, Richardson outlined his proposal. He wanted to sponsor Damon's enrollment in advanced mathematics and physics courses at the local community college. He would also arrange for Damon to attend a professional aviation maintenance program during summer breaks. All expenses paid, with Damon continuing to work weekends at the hangar. Carmen looked overwhelmed. "Mr. Richardson, we can't accept that kind of charity." "It's not charity," Richardson replied firmly. "It's an investment. Damon has already saved my company money by catching problems other people missed. I'm betting that with proper training he'll be worth 10 times what I'm spending on his education." Damon had been quiet during most of the conversation, but now he spoke up. "Can I ask you something, Mr. Richardson? Why are you doing this? I mean, really. You could hire any qualified mechanic you want." Richardson considered the question carefully. Over the past months, he had asked himself the same thing many times. "Honestly, at first it was just curiosity. You had impressed me, and I wanted to see what you could do with proper resources. But it's become more than that." He paused, trying to find the right words. "Damon, you remind me why I got into aviation in the first place. Before the business side took over, before it became all about profit margins and corporate politics. You have pure passion for understanding how things work and making them better. That's rare in my world." "But there's something else," Richardson continued. "You ask questions that make me think differently about things. Not just technical questions, but questions about business, about treating people fairly, about what success really means. I've learned as much from you as you have from me." It was true. Over the months, their conversations had ranged far beyond aircraft maintenance. Damon had a natural curiosity about how businesses operated, how decisions were made, and why some companies succeeded while others failed. His questions often forced Richardson to examine his own assumptions and practices. When Damon asked why Richardson paid his mechanics less than other companies in the area, Richardson had initially been defensive. But the conversation led him to review his entire compensation structure, ultimately resulting in across-the-board raises that improved both morale and employee retention. When Damon wondered why the company didn't offer apprenticeship programs for young people interested in aviation, Richardson realized he had been missing opportunities to develop talent from the ground up. They now had 3 other teenagers working, part-time, learning the trade under Damon's informal mentorship. As the evening wound down and Richardson prepared to leave, Carmen pulled him aside. "I need you to understand something about my son," she said quietly. "Damon has never had many advantages, but he's always been determined to make something of himself. This opportunity you're giving him, it means everything to us. I think I'm getting more out of this than he is," Richardson replied honestly. "Maybe that's what makes it work so well," Carmen said with a smile. Driving home through the wealthy suburbs where he lived, Richardson reflected on how much his life had changed since that stormy night in the hangar. His relationship with Damon had opened his eyes to a different way of thinking about business, about people, and about what really mattered. At his company, productivity was up, employee satisfaction had improved, and they were attracting better talent than ever before. But more than that, Richardson found himself looking forward to work in a way he hadn't in years. The fresh perspective that Damon brought to every challenge was infectious, inspiring everyone around him to think more creatively and work more collaboratively. What Richardson didn't realize yet was that the real lessons were just beginning. The foundation of trust and mutual respect they had built would soon be tested in ways neither of them could have imagined. And it would be Damon who would end up teaching Richardson the most important lesson of all about what money could and couldn't buy. 2 years had passed since that stormy night when James Richardson first met Damon in the airport hangar. Now 18 and preparing for college on a full scholarship that Richardson had helped arrange, Damon had become more than just an employee at Richardson Aviation. He was family, in a way that Richardson's own biological family had never quite achieved, which made it all the more painful when Richardson's carefully constructed world began to crumble. It started with a phone call at 3 in the morning. Richardson was jolted awake by the insistent ringing, and the voice on the other end was one he had been dreading to hear for months. "Mr. Richardson, this is Detective Martinez with the Chicago Police Department. We have your son Tyler in custody. He was arrested tonight for possession of cocaine with intent to distribute." Richardson sat up in bed, his mind struggling to process the words. Tyler was 21 now, supposedly finishing his senior year at Northwestern University. They had been growing apart for years, but Richardson had convinced himself it was just normal young adult rebellion. "I'll be right there," Richardson managed to say. The next few hours were a blur of lawyers, bail bondsmen, and difficult conversations. Tyler sat in the holding cell looking thin and hollow-eyed, a shadow of the confident young man he had once been. When Richardson finally got him released, Tyler could barely make eye contact. "Dad, I can explain," Tyler started, but Richardson held up a hand. "Not here. Let's go home." The drive back to Richardson's mansion was silent except for Tyler's occasional sniffling. Richardson's mind was racing, trying to figure out how he had missed the signs, how his son had spiraled so far out of control without him noticing. Over the next few days, the full scope of the problem became clear. Tyler had been ing drugs for over 2 years, starting with prescription pills after a sports injury and escalating to cocaine and other substances. His grades had plummeted, he owed money to dangerous people, and the arrest was just the latest in a series of increasingly reckless behaviors. Richardson did what he always did when faced with a problem. He threw money at it. Within a week, Tyler was enrolled in an exclusive rehabilitation facility in Colorado, with round-the-clock care and the best therapists money could buy. Richardson spared no expense. flying in specialists and arranging for private sessions with renowned addiction experts. But after 3 months and over $200,000, Tyler was back home and using again within a week. Richardson tried a different facility, this one in California with an even more impressive track record. Same result, then a program in Switzerland that cost more than most people's houses. Tyler completed the program but relapsed before he even made it back to Chicago. It was during Tyler's 4th failed attempt at rehabilitation that Richardson found himself sitting in his office late one evening, staring at bills and reports and feeling more helpless than he had ever felt in his life. All his wealth, all his connections, all his ability to solve problems with checkbooks and phone calls, and he couldn't help his own son. That's when Damon knocked on his office door. "Mr. Richardson, Mike said you were still here. It's almost midnight." Richardson looked up to see the young man who had become like a son to him over the past 2 years. Damon was now enrolled in engineering courses, excelling in his studies while continuing to work weekends at the hangar. His future was bright and full of promise, which made the contrast with Tyler even more painful. "Just catching up on some paperwork," Richardson said, trying to sound normal. But Damon knew him too well by now. "You've been different lately, distracted. Is everything okay?" Richardson considered brushing off the question, maintaining the professional distance that had always characterized his relationships. But looking at Damon's genuinely concerned expression, he found himself unable to keep up the facade. "It's Tyler," he said quietly. "My son, he's got a serious drug problem and I don't know how to help him." Damon sat down across from Richardson's desk, the same way he had during dozens of conversations about aircraft maintenance and business decisions. But this time the roles were reversed. This time Richardson was the one who needed help. "How long has this been going on?" Damon asked. Richardson found himself telling the whole story. The arrests, the failed rehabilitation attempts, the lies and broken promises, the growing distance between him and Tyler, and his own feeling of complete helplessness in the face of a problem that couldn't be solved with money or influence. "I've tried everything," Richardson concluded. "The best facilities, the most expensive treatments, specialists from around the world. Nothing works. He gets clean for a few weeks or months and then he's right back where he started." Damon listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just being present in a way that Richardson realized few people in his life ever were. When Richardson finished, Damon was quiet for a long moment. "Can I ask you something?" Damon finally said. "When Tyler was growing up, what was your relationship like?" The question caught Richardson off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, did you spend time together? Talk about things that mattered to him? Or were you mostly focused on providing for him financially?" Richardson felt a stab of defensive anger, but it quickly faded into something more painful. Recognition. "I worked a lot when Tyler was young, building the business, trying to provide security for his future. I thought that was what a good father did." "I'm sure it was," Damon said gently, "but maybe that's part of what we need to understand." "We? If you want my help, I'd like to meet Tyler, talk to him. Not as a counselor or therapist, just as someone who might understand some of what he's going through." Richardson was skeptical. "Damon, no offense, but Tyler has been in therapy with some of the best addiction specialists in the country. What could you possibly offer that they couldn't?" "Maybe nothing," Damon admitted. "But in my neighborhood, I've seen a lot of people struggle with addiction. My cousin Roberto, my friend Kevin's older brother, several people my mom works with. The ones who got clean and stayed clean, it wasn't usually because they found the most expensive treatment program. What was it then? Community. People who cared about them not because it was their job, but because they genuinely mattered to them. People who had been through similar struggles and could relate. And most importantly, having something meaningful to do with their lives beyond just staying clean." Richardson thought about the pristine rehabilitation facilities Tyler had attended, with their luxury accommodations and professional staff. "You think those places are too impersonal?" "I think they might be treating the symptoms instead of the cause," Damon said carefully. "From what you've told me, Tyler has had every material advantage, but maybe not enough genuine connection. When someone feels isolated and purposeless, substances can seem like the only thing that fills that void." It was a perspective Richardson had never considered, and it made uncomfortable sense. He thought about his own relationship with Tyler, how they rarely had meaningful conversations, how most of their interactions revolved around Richardson providing money or solving problems, rather than actually connecting as father and son. "What are you suggesting?" Richardson asked. Let me spend some time with Tyler. Not trying to fix him or counsel him, just getting to know him. Maybe we can figure out what he's really looking for and find healthier ways to meet those needs. And you think that would work better than professional treatment? I think it might work alongside professional treatment, Damon clarified. The therapy and medical support are important. But maybe what Tyler really needs is to feel like he matters to people. Like he has a purpose beyond just not using drugs. Richardson stared at this young man who continued to surprise him with insights that cut straight to the heart of complex problems. Here was someone who had grown up with none of Tyler's advantages, but who possessed a wisdom about human nature that Richardson was only beginning to appreciate. Why would you want to do this? Richardson asked. You barely know Tyler. Damon was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. You gave me a chance when nobody else would. You saw potential in me that I didn't even know I had. Maybe I can do the same thing for Tyler. But there's something else, Damon continued. Over the past 2 years, you've become like a father to me. Not because you've given me money or opportunities, though. I'm grateful for those things. But because you've listened to me, respected my ideas, and made me feel like my thoughts and opinions matter. Maybe Tyler needs to experience that side of you, too. The words hit Richardson like a physical blow, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. In trying to provide for Tyler financially, he had somehow forgotten to provide for him emotionally. He had been a provider, but not really a father. As Richardson sat there in his office at midnight, looking at this remarkable young man who had somehow become the son he had always wanted Tyler to be, he realized that the tables had completely turned. The mentorship that had started with him teaching Damon about business and aviation had evolved into something deeper and more complex. Now it was Damon who was teaching him about the things that really mattered: authentic relationships, genuine connection, and the difference between providing for someone and actually caring for them. The lessons Richardson needed most couldn't be bought with money or solved with expensive solutions. They required something much more difficult and much more valuable: the willingness to be vulnerable, to admit mistakes, and to learn from someone who had grown up with nothing, but had somehow figured out what really mattered in life. The meeting between Damon and Tyler took place on a Saturday afternoon at Richardson's house. Tyler had been home from his latest failed rehabilitation attempt for 2 weeks, and the tension in the mansion was thick enough to cut with a knife. Richardson watched nervously from the kitchen window as the two young men sat by the pool, unsure what to expect. Tyler looked suspicious and defensive, slumped in his chair with his arms crossed. At 21, he should have been in the prime of his life, but drug abuse had left him gaunt and hollow-eyed. Damon, now 18 but carrying himself with a maturity beyond his years, sat relaxed and patient. So you're the kid my dad's always talking about, Tyler said, his voice carrying a mixture of curiosity and resentment. The one who's so smart about airplanes. I just like figuring out how things work, Damon replied simply. Your dad gave me a chance to learn about aviation when nobody else would. Must be nice having him think you're special, Tyler muttered. All I ever get is disappointment and lectures about wasted potential. Instead of defending Richardson or offering empty reassurances, Damon just nodded. That sounds really hard, feeling like you can never measure up to someone's expectations. Tyler looked surprised by the response. He had been expecting judgment or advice, not understanding. You have no idea what it's like, growing up with James Richardson as your father. Everything has to be perfect, everything has to be successful. There's no room for mistakes or just being normal. You're right, I don't know what that's like, Damon acknowledged. My situation was pretty different, but I do know what it feels like to think you're not good enough, to feel like you don't belong anywhere. Over the next hour, something unexpected happened. Instead of trying to fix Tyler or offer solutions, Damon simply listened. He asked questions not to gather information but to understand. He shared his own experiences growing up in poverty, watching his mother work multiple jobs, feeling like an outsider in Richardson's wealthy world. What struck Tyler most was that Damon didn't try to minimize his pain or compare struggles. He didn't say things like, "At least you had advantages," or "Other people have it worse." He just acknowledged that pain was pain, regardless of circumstances. "Can I ask you something?" Tyler said eventually. "Why do you care? I mean, you barely know me, and from what my dad probably told you, I'm just a screw-up who wastes money on drugs." "Because I think you're more than the worst thing you've ever done," Damon replied. And because someone once saw potential in me when I couldn't see it in myself. Maybe you need someone to do that for you too. Richardson, who had been eavesdropping from the kitchen, felt his throat tighten. In 45 minutes, Damon had accomplished something that months of expensive therapy hadn't. He had gotten Tyler to open up and talk honestly about his feelings. But Damon's approach to helping Tyler was unlike anything Richardson had experienced. There were no dramatic interventions, no expensive treatment programs, no ultimatums or consequences. Instead, Damon simply started showing up. Every Saturday after work at the hangar, Damon would stop by the Richardson house. Sometimes he and Tyler would talk, sometimes they would just watch movies or play video games. Damon never lectured Tyler about drugs or made him feel guilty about his choices. He just provided consistent, non-judgmental presence. Gradually, Tyler began opening up about the real issues underlying his addiction. The crushing pressure to live up to his father's success, the loneliness of growing up with every material advantage but little emotional connection, the feeling that he was valued more for his potential achievements than for who he actually was as a person. I started using because it was the only time I felt relaxed, Tyler confided one afternoon. When I was high, I didn't have to worry about disappointing anyone or living up to expectations. I could just exist without feeling like I was failing. Damon understood this in a way that surprised Tyler. I used to feel something similar when I was younger, he said. Not with drugs, but with anger. I was so frustrated about being poor, about not having opportunities, that I would just get furious at everything. It felt better than feeling powerless, and what changed? I found something I was passionate about. Something that gave me purpose beyond just surviving or proving myself to other people. For me, it was aircraft and engineering, but it could be anything as long as it matters to you. This conversation led to a breakthrough idea. Instead of focusing on getting Tyler to stop using drugs, Damon suggested they focus on finding something positive for Tyler to care about. Something that would give his life meaning and direction. Tyler had always been interested in music but had been discouraged from pursuing it seriously, because Richardson viewed it as impractical. With Damon's encouragement, Tyler began taking guitar lessons and writing songs. For the first time in years, he had something to look forward to besides his next high. But the real transformation happened when Tyler started joining Damon's community activities. Damon had been volunteering at a youth center in his old neighborhood, helping kids with homework and teaching basic engineering concepts. He invited Tyler to come along. At first, Tyler was nervous about being in such a different environment. These kids had grown up with challenges he had never faced. But gradually he discovered that they didn't care about his wealth or his mistakes. They just appreciated having another adult who was willing to listen and help. Tyler began teaching music lessons at the youth center, sharing his passion for guitar and songwriting with kids who had little access to such opportunities. For the first time in his adult life, he felt genuinely needed and valued for something other than his potential or his problems. Richardson watched this transformation with amazement and growing understanding. The expensive rehabilitation programs had focused on removing drugs from Tyler's life, but they hadn't given him anything meaningful to replace them with. Damon's approach had been to help Tyler find purpose and community, making drugs less appealing by giving him better alternatives. But the lessons weren't just for Tyler. Richardson realized that his own approach to relationships had been fundamentally flawed. He had treated his son the same way he treated business problems, identifying issues and throwing resources at them until they were solved. He had never simply been present with Tyler, accepting him as he was rather than constantly trying to improve him. One evening, as Richardson watched Tyler enthusiastically planning a music program for the youth center kids, he pulled Damon aside. "I need to thank you," Richardson said, "not just for helping Tyler, but for teaching me how to be a better father." "You were always a good father," Damon replied. "You just needed to trust that caring about someone is more powerful than trying to fix them." "Where did you learn that?" Damon smiled. "From my mom, mostly. She never had money to solve my problems, so she had to rely on other things. Love, patience, presence. She taught me that the most valuable things you can give someone can't be bought." Richardson thought about all the expensive gifts he had given Tyler over the years, all the problems he had tried to solve with money. None of it had been as effective as Damon simply showing up consistently and treating Tyler like a person worth knowing. "I spent so much energy trying to provide for Tyler that I forgot to actually connect with him," Richardson admitted. It's not too late, Damon said. He's been wanting that connection his whole life. He just needs to know that you value him for who he is, not just for who you think he could become. Over the following months, Richardson began applying these lessons to all his relationships. He started having regular one-on-one conversations with his employees, not about work, but about their lives and goals. He discovered that the mechanics at his hangar had fascinating stories and insights he had never bothered to learn about. He also began spending more time in Damon's neighborhood, volunteering at the youth center and getting to know the community that had shaped the young man who had taught him so much. He met parents who worked multiple jobs but still found time to coach little league teams. He met teenagers who faced significant challenges but maintained hope and determination. These experiences opened Richardson's eyes to a different kind of wealth, the richness that comes from genuine human connection, shared purpose, and mutual support. It was a wealth that couldn't be measured in bank accounts or stock portfolios, but it was more valuable than anything money could buy. Tyler's recovery wasn't instant or perfect. He had setbacks and difficult days, but with consistent support from both Damon and his father, he gradually built a life centered around music, community service, and authentic relationships rather than escape and avoidance. 2 years later, as Richardson sat in the audience watching Tyler perform an original song at a youth center fundraiser, he reflected on how much his understanding of success had changed. The young man on stage wasn't the high-achieving executive Richardson had once envisioned, but he was healthy, purposeful, and genuinely happy. More importantly, he was loved and valued for exactly who he was. Damon, now finishing his engineering degree while running his own small aviation consulting firm, sat beside Richardson in the audience. Their relationship had evolved from mentor and student to genuine friendship between equals. Richardson had given Damon opportunities and resources, but Damon had given Richardson something far more precious, the understanding that true wealth lies in the quality of your relationships and the depth of your connections with others. Tyler's music filled the room and Richardson watched. The faces of the kids who looked up to his son with admiration and affection. He understood the most important lesson of his life. Money could buy many things, but it couldn't buy the things that mattered most: love, respect, purpose, and the knowledge that you matter to other people, not for what you can provide, but for who you are. The poor kid from the wrong side of town had taught one of the richest men in the city that the most valuable currency in life was something that had been available to him all along, if only he had known how to spend it.